Hello, my Saturday morning. I did a video for you yesterday, but it was long and rambling. So this morning I did another one, which was short, to the point, brilliantly put across, but I think it was wrong. So I'm going to do this video and see if I can make it right. I'm talking about banking again, and the short video I made this morning, it was so precise and concise. And as I said, even you could understand it, and you could have understood it, but it would have been wrong. And I'm a bit annoyed because I've got to put "I think" at the end of it. And I want to blame somebody for my ignorance, but I can't blame anybody but me. So what I'm still firing off is Steve Keen on the video I put up, where he was proving that banks cannot lend from the reserves that they hold at the central bank, because it would throw their accounting off from a double entry bookkeeping point of view. All right, so I'm still on this, and the video I did this morning was so brilliant to say that if it's right for reserves, it's right for all cash held on account. In other words, you put a deposit in. If I do this as a presentation, I probably will, because I've done my fives. There's only 3 lots of 5, but I've done them. Okay, presentation. What we have here is 5 and 5. Now this was, I explained, a balanced bank. I did talk about equity and how if the bank wasn't balanced, if assets were less than liabilities, it was insolvent and should be closed down. But if assets are more than liabilities, then that's technically owned by the equity holders. That's equity. That's, let's call it profit for the owners. But what I was dealing with was a balanced bank account. Books of a bank, zeroed out for double entry bookkeeping point of view. Now, I'll do it in the past tense still. You went into the bank and you put 5 in, and that goes in on the right hand side of the bank's books as a liability, because they are liable to give you that 5 back tomorrow when you go in and want it. So you go in and give them 5. It goes 5 on the liability side, the right hand side of the bank's books, and also at the same time, whoosh, because law states that that money now belongs to the bank, and for double entry bookkeeping point of view, things have to balance. 5 goes onto the asset side of the bank's books as 5 cash. Whether it's called cash or not, I'm really not sure. It could be held in the bank's reserve account or the bank's checking account at the central bank, but we'll call it cash. So you've got your money, you've put in 5, it's a liability, the bank must pay you out that 5, so it's gone on the liability side of the books, and because the bank now has that cash, it goes 5 on the asset side of the books. Right. So far, so good, and I think I start getting confused. And don't think just because I get confused that you would naturally be confused and stop listening. Still pay attention. Okay. The top 2 5s are you going in and doing what I just said. Putting the 5 in on the liability side, that's the top right 5. And that your cash held by the bank is on the asset side of the bank, and that's the top left 5. Okay. Now the 2 other 5s are me following you in. You've just gone out, I've just gone in. And I want to borrow 5. The bank manager obviously says, yes, Mystic, of course we'll lend you money, and puts 5 on the liability side of the bank, which is my deposit account. It puts 5 in there for me and says, there you go, spend it when you like. And I sign a bit of paper saying, I'll pay you back that 5, no worries. They put that piece of paper registered as 5 on their asset side. So at the moment they've got your 5 cash, your 5 liability, my 5 liability, and my bit of paper to say that I'll pay them back, which is another 5 asset. We're balanced, we're fine. And this is where I went wrong in my concise thing this morning. Right, I forgot that this is a hanging possibility. The money is there for me to take out of my checking account and spend it for whatever I borrowed it for. So, did I do this on the next one? I've crossed the wrong ones off, but it doesn't really matter. Or should I change them? No, just admit that I'm far from perfect and I've made a mistake, because I should be crossing off the bottom right and the top left. Now, okay, it doesn't really matter, because the main thing about this is, from a banking point of view, they have got much more than 5 and 5 and 5 and 5. Citibank and JPM Morgan and all that lot, they've got huge quantities of this. And what I'm thinking is, knowing that if you asked a banker, do they lend deposits, the question wouldn't make sense to them. It wouldn't be the way that a banker looks at the bank and the way the bank functions as lending deposits. It wouldn't compute. It wouldn't make sense. Their information would be presented to them in the boardroom in a different way. It wouldn't be this, we've got these deposits and those, and they go, well, let's lend some of these deposits, and it just wouldn't happen that way. And I don't think that this would seem mind-bendingly petty and stupid to them. And even the question, can they lend reserves? I don't think they would even understand that question, because it just would not come up. Anyway, let's go back to this one. I really wish I'd crossed the right ones out. So I'll change it round and know that in the past I did make this mistake. Now I've made it right again. So the bottom right 5 is crossed out. Yeah. And the top right 5 is crossed out. Yeah. Okay. Now what this is, the bottom right 5 being crossed out, is me taking my loan out. I needed that money for something. It's crossed out because I've taken it away. I've written the check for it. It's not a liability for the bank anymore, because they're not liable to pay it again. So they've crossed it from their liability side on my checking account. It's gone. I've written the check to another person and it's gone into another bank. The question is now, we know that the bottom left 5 is going to remain, because that's my signature for the debt now that I am owing to the bank. It's an asset on the bank side and it stays there. What we must cross out off is something on the asset side. Now this is where I think a huge bank doesn't really know what to cross off. It knows it's got to cross off something, and the accountants will do it somewhere along the line. But what we can say is, we'll cross off yours. We'll cross off the money that is technically yours in there, okay, that you put in. So there's no actual counterbalancing 5 for the money that you put in anymore. That's crossed off, and we can imagine in words that I have borrowed the cash that you put in. Yeah, that could be full reserve banking, and what we have remaining is the bank's liability to you for 5 of cash, and what it has to back that up is a piece of paper written by me that I will one day pay them. And then they've got this time mismatch that you can demand your money now, but I do not have to pay my money now. I can pay it over 10 years or whatever the agreement is, and any interest will go for running the bank. So they've got this time mismatch, and we've got this cross off. And that's always the problem with banking, and that's what Mervyn King the governor of the Bank of England was talking about when he said it's the worst way of banking that you can, the worst way of doing things, because there's always this time mismatch where deposits which are covered by insurance but could be wanted like that and cause a bank run because people can stack up in queues outside and take all the money out. The bank might only have long-term loans backing those up. Now, the reason central banks came into being, but certainly the Federal Reserve came into being, was to stop this sort of thing. In this case of a run where people would be wanting to take their fives out and it was only backed up by long-term fives on the asset side, the central bank said, don't worry, we'll check your books. If you're balanced, you've got assets which are good and they do balance out the liabilities, we will take those long-term assets off you temporarily, charge you a bit of money for it, and put cash on your asset side so you can pay out, so the bank run will peter out because everybody will be made happy. Okay. Do I want to go on further? I've got one more to do. Okay, yeah. Let's go for fountain pen money, fresh air lending, money from nowhere, computer keyboard money. So we've got the same number 3 fives up with the fives crossed out. But what we've got now is how should we do this? Let's go. Yeah, let's go back to number 2 where nothing's crossed out, or you don't need to go back. It's just that all the 4 fives are there, but nothing's crossed out. Your the 2 fives at the top, your cash, your deposit, and the cash on the asset side for the bank for that stays there. Now down below, I go in and want a loan. The bank goes, fresh air money, this mystic. So goes, okay, bash on the liability side, boof, like that, right hand side, 5, ready for Mystic to take away, and the Mystic writes his bit of paper and goes, doosh, puts it there. Okay, that's fresh air money. That's what we're talking about. They make money from nowhere and do that. They put the 5 from nowhere into the thing, my deposit account, and has my piece of paper on the other side. Now, when we come to crossing out, I take my money out, so I'm crossed off. I've taken my loan out, yeah. So I've crossed the bottom right-hand 5 off, and we've got the 2 fives that we can cross off. And obviously, to balance the books, we're not going to cross off my piece of paper. That's going to remain on the bank books. So we've got to cross something off. So we're going to cross the cash off anyway. You see what I mean? Even if we talk it through like we've just lent the money, fresh air money, to balance the books, we've got to cross something off the asset side. And if that cash is there, we can cross the cash off, or will cross the cash off. We're not going to cross assets off. You can't cross assets off. What I'm trying to say is I think Steve Keen and myself, I can't say it like that. I'll leave it like that, but I know it sounds wrong. Steve Keen, myself. Steve Keen is maintaining that you can't lend reserves from the reserve account at the central bank because the accounts won't be right. And I've gone along with that and expanded it to, well, if it's right for you can't lend reserves, you can't lend cash. And it is exactly that. But none of it makes sense, actually, when you come to do it and cross things off when the money goes out. It's impossible to say that you are lending reserves. You can do the same thing by just saying, well, this is fresh air money, but from an accounting point of view, it looks exactly the same as though you've lent cash out. And I'm not happy with this now. This is the second video I've made of Saturday after the Friday one, and I want you now, you can see how easy it is. You know what happens when you put money into a bank. It becomes a liability for them, and their cash goes on the other side. And then do it just with fives or tens, whatever you feel like. Just put the figures in as though they're, okay, they do fresh air money, and they just put 5 into your 10,000 million into your deposit account, and take your piece of paper, your signature for the loan, and put it on the asset side. You work it out. You work out how, from a double entry bookkeeping point of view, where everything must be balanced, how things work out. And does it make sense to say that banks can't make loans from reserves from that point of view? Or does it all work out the same? And a banker just wouldn't understand it, because it all works out the same anyway. And then, when you've got that right in your head, think about it from what would be a fractional reserve banking position or a full reserve banking position, where if it was full reserve banking, what's the difference? What is in fact the difference from an accounting point of view? I want you to work it out, because quite frankly this is starting to frustrate me. When I tried to work it out myself and thought that I thought the same as Steve Keen, and then Steve Keen says it, so I say, well, this must be right. But I come to work it out on a piece of paper and it just looks wrong. So I need your help. Get a pen and paper out and try and work it out for me, and see what you can make of it, so we can be right or wrong together, because I'm sick of blathering on about this sort of stuff. I'd like some talk in the pub about this. We'd write on the backs of beer mats. It's not tricky. It's nothing we don't know, but it does need working out. Leave it with you. Thanks. Bye.